Good afternoon, everyone. Jeff Jensen here, Director of Community Programs with Trees Forever, and we have another wonderful Stewards of the Beautiful Land webinar for you. A great topic, great presenters, so let's get to it. You should be able to see and hear us, but we cannot see or hear you. And so what that means is the way that you can communicate with us is through the questions tab. So please utilize that questions tab. I'll be monitoring that throughout the day here, and you can ask questions anytime. If there's an opportunity to slip them in, great. Otherwise, we'll certainly at the end get both of our presenters feedback. We do have two solid presenters here today, our very own Bree Hull and then Sarah Beckman with the Hartman. Thank you, got that one right. Preserve. So we'll get to them in just a moment here. Let me see why my presentation's not working. Give me a second. There we go. So just a reminder of the Stewards of the Beautiful Land landing page that we have on the Trees Forever website. Please go check that out. It's got all of our webinars where you can find recorded versions of them as well, simple links, as well as our field days that we have coming up here. And then, of course, I wanted to highlight our Facebook group. Bree does a great job of monitoring and overseeing our Facebook page, so please check that out, utilize that. It's a wonderful resource and an opportunity to check in and see what's going on, all the different locations with Stewards of the Beautiful Land. Just a reminder of a few upcoming webinars and field days before we get to our main event, Landscaping with Natives. Upcoming webinars, September 3rd, we're going to be talking about invasive species removal. And then September 17th, we're going to have a representative from the DNR, Mark Runkle, and he's going to talk about the top 7 invasive species threats in the state of Iowa, from bugs to actual plants like Oriental bittersweet and things like that. He's going to give us the lowdown of what we need to be aware of statewide regarding invasive species. Some field days, and in fact, if you're so inclined, 6 o'clock tonight, Marshall County, there's going to be a summer prairie walk at the Marietta Sand Prairie. Wonderful opportunity to see what's blooming there. Next week here, Wednesday the 27th, Cerro Gordo County. We'll be doing a prairie tour and invasive species removal at Lime Creek Nature Center starting at 5:30 p.m. That's going to be a rockin' good time. They've got some great facilities there and a great prairie to look at. And then Saturday, September 16th, head up to Northeast Iowa, Alameda County. That's going to be your Meet Your County Roadside Manager. Bree Hull's going to be there 10 to 12. And then September 10th in Marshall County, we'll have a tree ID and woodland management walk at Grammar Grove. And that'll actually be with Trees Forever Field Coordinator Brad Riphagen and DNR District Forester Joe Herring. So he'll be leading that woodland management and tree ID walk. And then in September, a few more. Cass County, we have a woodland management and tree planting session at Pellet Woods. And then we wrap things up, Cerro Gordo County, a prairie tour and planting at Lime Creek Nature Center. And I believe that Bree even has a planting in October. So stay tuned for that as well, because that's another opportunity up there in Alameda County. Those are some of those field days that are on our Stewards of the Beautiful Land landing page, the full suite, as one might say. So check that out. Just a reminder that you cannot hear or see us, but pardon me, we cannot hear or see you. I hope you can hear and see us, but you can communicate with us in the questions tab. So if you have a question, please go ahead and type it in there. In fact, I'm just going to check out the questions tab. It looks like we have one. Oh, folks are checking in from where they're from. Great. Yep. Awesome. Okay, well, without further ado, let's get into the reason everyone's here. We're going to talk about landscaping with natives with Bree Hull and Sarah Beckman.
All right, I'm going to go ahead, turn my camera off, and take control here. Jeff, so I'll be sharing the screen for Sarah, and I just need to grab presenter control.
So Bree, did that go through?
There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Are we all seeing what we need to see?
Yes, coming through, seeing it well.
Perfect. All right. Sarah, take it away.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to join this webinar. Like I was saying earlier, this is not usually my format of teaching or spending time with people. So thank you for the new challenge that I found myself in this afternoon, and happy to share a little bit about what's going on here at Hartman as far as being an urban nature center and how we sort of manage our botany accordingly. So just a little background information about Hartman Reserve. We are located in urban areas, an urban nature center, just really smack dab in the middle of Waterloo and Cedar Falls. We consist of over 300 acres, approximately 345 acres, and we have what we call our north and south unit here. So, and with the nature center, kind of the hub of the area is on the south unit. So we are approximately 90% of woodland, and now have in recent years incorporated more prairie plantings. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about those as we move along. But we have a management plan that was originally written in 2013. And our forester, Jim, will always sort of coin the term that this is a big garden and it's always changing. And the plan, sometimes there's not much of a plan because the forest does have a way of changing itself. But the goals at Hartman are to promote some native planting to encourage our community members to do the same in their own landscape at wherever it is their own. If they're in a residence here in town or in more of a rural setting. So one thing that's a little bit unique to Hartman, we are more of a metro urban area as opposed to a rural nature center. So that is largely our audience here. And so we spend a lot of time trying to inform folks about how to plan for natives and also just the ways that they spend time in the forest and what they see. So one of the very important parts is the Pollinator Parkway, where we've distributed prairie plants native from Blooming Prairie, the nursery in Carlisle. They provide our plants, and we have a pollinator parkway, pardon me, where in the backside of our nature center, we have them designated in specific locations so that visitors can learn more about what we've planted here. And so we have cardinal flower and rattlesnake master, the liatris, goldenrod, culver's root, the grasses, so that folks can come out here and see those specifically to learn more about the plants. And then all around the nature center, we are slowly pivoting from Kentucky bluegrass and mowing to more of these little sort of prairie pockets around the nature center. So this just decreases our amount of labor intensity. We are fully staffed here, but also in the summertime, nearly almost short-staffed as far as arms and hands available for labor. So we have started to plant by direct seeding prairie all around the nature center, as well as established a prairie down below in our lowland forest area. An area was planted in the early 2000s, and then one near more around the 2010, and both are managed now through burning. We have a burn crew and a plan, and so that's how we manage all of the prairies around the Hartman area. We do have to be very delicate on when and how we burn. We do have residents neighboring all sides of the nature center, And we also have a school for kiddos with special abilities. So we need to take into consideration their health and being very cautious of when we burn. So that's how we manage our pollinator parkway and also our planted prairies throughout the 340 acres. We have 2 main prairies, and then, like I said, 90% of our area, our landscape is timber. So much of our focus does reside in timber stand management, and we follow our plan to the best of our ability. In our most recent addition to the Nature Center, the hydrology, the way the water moves around the Nature Center. And there's a few more photos of our prairie parkways and our Bluebird Trail, which is something that we use for our education, and also our monarch watch zone, if you will. So we can kind of use that for education as well. So thank you for sharing those, Bree. Our areas of focus in our timber is the sugar maple management. For one, we do have 3 sugar bushes located here at Hartman, and we do tap in March typically, if that's when the temperature is above freezing during the day and below freezing at night. It is typically when we do the tapping, and we tap with the public, so they're able to come out. School groups, public, community members will come out and help us tap. I think we did maybe 120 trees last year. We originally had 3 sugar maple bushes, and one in the most recent years, since 2019, develop a fungus, and we are sort of leading to the conclusion that it was how the hydrology, the water moves here at Hartman when the 2019 edition was built. So we're trying to currently work on a new plan for that sugar bush that is sort of expiring. We are an old succession forest, where it's an old forest where we're seeing a lot of mature trees die, and then navigating on how many of those should be harvested to encourage new tree growth. So for our sugar maple management, what we typically do is create space for the healthy sugar maples to thrive, and that might be taken care of by girdling. We've girdled ironwood this past year. We typically girdle instead of felling the trees, so that we just don't have the labor for that. And then we don't do any cleanup other than if it's leaning or laying on a trail and could be a hazard for the public that utilizes our trail system. So then typically things just lay, and it encourages new growth in the understory, which is also one of our priorities, is to have a healthy understory of our forest. Much of the 90% of our timbered areas have been grazed, also mined for sand and gravel at one point in our history here. So to encourage a healthy understory for biodiversity is also one of our main priorities. But the sugar maple management is closer to the top rung of how we try to appeal to folks to come out here. We have a maple syrup festival where we do cook and serve our own syrup, and folks come to that. I mean, several thousand people will attend that in one weekend's time. So the management of our sugar bush is a high priority here. And then also how we're going to sort of remanage the sugar bush that is experiencing more of a fungus and more of a wetland area. The other sort of approach to our woodland management here is we do have one oak savanna, and it was deemed oak savanna years ago, long before my time here. The most recent original plan was written in 2013, but prior to that, we have one area that is located again near our River Hills School as an oak savanna, and that has led to some obstacles. Now, when the management first occurred, there was quite a clear cut and exposed the understory to a lot of sunlight, which now encourages just a plethora of poison ivy. If it's, you know, not commonly traversed, that's not as big of an issue, but because we have thousands and thousands of folks that navigate the woods via trail systems here, it is more of a priority that in the recent months that we've had to spray and try to get control. Our forest manager, Jim Weimer, is responsible for taking care of that in the most responsible way that he can. But because we opened that oak savanna, the understory was just really overtaken with the honeysuckle and poison ivy almost blanketing the forest floor right now. So that is another one of our areas that we are still kind of in the process of. How do we regenerate the oak and the hickory, as well as some of these open spaces, and not encourage some of the more invasive, the honeysuckle and also poison ivy, to grow. So that is our oak savanna that is currently in working process. So we do have current projects that we're working on now, and through sort of trials and tribulations of what works and what doesn't, especially in a public area. We are working on a family picnic area where we can incorporate some native landscaping again, to encourage folks to do the same in their own backyards. And most recently, we did a ravine stabilization project, which took several months. But in the middle photo that you all can see, there is a new set of steps. And on either side of that, we have a stream that runs through the entire property of Hartman Reserve. Depending on how much rain we've had or lack thereof, it will be flowing more full. And then in the other picture that you see here, where it's just mostly rock, it's mostly empty. But we did stabilize the bluff, where we added large boulders instead of having more like man-made looking structures, some cages and fencing to hold the bluff into place. We've stabilized that now with large boulders. And along the banks, both sides of the stream, we have different sedges and native plants that can withstand wet roots. And then the stream itself was sort of redesigned with step pools in mind, so areas of water that they can puddle a little bit more. We're using that for a couple different purposes. We certainly want to encourage our camp kids, folks that are down here recreating with their own children and themselves, to get off the trail here. We have so many areas where we really must stay on the trail because of erosion on our bluff. This is one of the areas that we're now encouraging for people to step off the trail and do a little creek stomping, explore the diversity in the step pools. So that is one of our most recent projects that just wrapped here in July, in fact, and recently opened again to the public. We do have in the first photo a little island, if you will, in the middle of our parking lot. And that is the first thing that you see when you approach Hartman Reserve. And underneath that is, in fact, an old swimming pool. So the history prior to Hartman being Hartman Reserve, it was a Y camp. And there is still underneath the asphalt a pool that was, in hindsight, should have been probably completely removed. And because it didn't, right in the middle of that island is a deep pooling area where it's very wet all the time. There are some cattails growing in there. And this whole region was prairie mostly, but then we were getting the wild parsnip and we were getting poison ivy sort of taking over. So we recently mowed that down. We're going to cover it with tarps and sort of this smother everything else that's there and kind of start fresh, hoping to add some picnic areas as well as more cattails, blue flag iris to the wetland area to make that a little bit more appealing. It's never going to be dry, so our approach is to plant accordingly to support plants that will be okay with those wet roots. We'll also place some metal signs that are a little bit more artistic than informative, but they will sort of, let's see here, they'll represent a prairie landscape as well as a wetland. So those are some of the projects that we currently have underway. We do have people here at Hartman and around the area that really want to have input. So we are very careful about like how much we do, how fast. This is kind of a legacy for many people that have been here for generations. So we are very sensitive to making big and bold changes. Too suddenly, folks really connect with our landscape here. And so tiny little bits of work in progress seem to be the best for us. So here on site, we do have a state preserve. It was issued a state preserve in 2005, and it's the active management of an upland forest. So again, the regeneration of our oak and hickory. Here at Hartman, we do have representation of upland and lowland forest here. It was originally signed and surveyed by John Pearson, signed by Governor Vilsack at that time. And so we do have some parameters and umbrella of management that we have to sort of abide by, which means we no building on that site, no amending the understory. We do have you know, different woodland wildflowers, especially in the springtime, trout lilies, May apples, ferns that do grow and are a little bit more sensitive to being disturbed. And that part of Hartman within the state preserve, the 46 acres, has never been grazed. And it is the only part of Hartman that was not disturbed at one point in time in history. So those are the general approaches to management. What we have going on here at Hartman as far as our priorities, the sugar bush, the regeneration of the oak and hickory, as well as pivoting away from mowing and planting more prairies through direct seeding and then managed through burning. And those are our focuses here at Hartman. And I am certainly open and interested in feedback or taking questions about our area specifically, or what we do to sort of uphold our little place here.
Okay, so we are going to hold off on questions until the very end. Don't forget that if you have any questions for Sarah, just throw them on in the chat box, and then we'll be sure to get to those at the end here. All right.
Hey, a real quick question. I'm going to jump in. A question is a sugar bush the same as a sugar maple tree? Is it just nomenclature?
Yes, yeah, great question. So our sugar bush we refer to is our sugar maple stand. And we do have two that are very active, but yeah, our sugar bush just is our sugar maple trees.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right. And thank you again so much, Sarah. And I hope you're able to stick on with us until the end to answer those questions.
Certainly.
Fantastic. All right. So I'm going to take over this portion of the presentation here. So Sarah went ahead and helped us out with that urban area, and I'm hoping that some of the information that we have over here for the more rural management methods that we have here in Iowa can be adapted and transferred over to even your own landscaping practices. So my name is Bree Hull. I'm the Northeast Iowa Field Coordinator with Trees Forever. I threw my email up there, and don't worry if you can't catch it now. I will have it up again at the end if you ever have any questions or anything else you'd like to reach out to us for. So I kind of want to start at the very tippy top here. So get into a little bit of why we have natives in our roadsides. You might be driving and see our tall grasses and the flowers, and you might notice in certain counties you see them and others you don't. And you might see more of those traditional practices on our roadsides where you have the cut Kentucky bluegrass and everything. So as many of you may know, Iowa is the most altered state in terms of our landscape. Prior to colonization, most of our land was covered in the rolling native grasslands with the tall grass prairies and the wildflowers, forbs, sedges. Now only 0.1%, so 0.01% of that remains untouched. And that's only accounting for remnant prairies, which are prairies that have never been tilled up and are very different from our reconstructions. You can never truly go back to the biodiversity that you have of a remnant prairie with a reconstruction, but we can do the best that we can. And we can do those things to also help support our native pollinators and insects, birds, animals. So due to the altering of the landscape, we saw many issues that impacted our native environment. So the Living Roadway Trust Fund was founded in 1988 under Iowa Code 314.21. This program focuses on working through many partners in Iowa to educate the public on the benefits, use, and care of native plants through grants, publications, research, and education programs, like this one. So you might see some of those booklets and things rolling around, graphics. Those are all things to help educate others like yourselves on why we need these things and how they can be implemented. And this is one way that the state has worked to implement it on our public lands, which in Iowa mostly means our right-of-ways or the roadsides. So with that program, one important part is getting a roadside manager. So you might be wondering what that is. We've kind of talked a little bit about it. Some of our field days typically revolve around meeting that roadside manager, which next month, if you'd like to meet with us up in Northeast Iowa, we will be meeting a roadside manager and he will be giving us a tour of his equipment. So roadside managers are individuals that are hired by the county and housed in different departments. Sometimes they also hold the county's title as the weed commissioner, so that's still that management practice that they're doing. After a county can only qualify to have a roadside manager once they've completed a roadside program. So those are able to be completed at the county and the city level. And once they have completed and submitted that roadside plan, it's been approved, the county is eligible for the annual grant funding through LRTF in 13 different funding categories. But like I said, they're also eligible to hire that roadside manager. And they're responsible for maintaining the roadsides using an integrated management method to ensure biodiversity, reduce erosion, and maintain safety. Safety is at the very top of it, especially when we're working with the DOT. I didn't point it out back here, but this program is also it's in partnership with the Iowa Roadside Management Program, Iowa Living Roadway Trust Fund, and the DOT. So the responsibilities of the roadside manager include using those integrated vegetation management methods, which also includes planting natives. They provide that local leadership and knowledge, and they regularly attend those annual roadside vegetation meetings to continue to learn more and connect with other managers and ensure that we're still following code. So one nifty tool that I like to show, especially if you're just now dipping your toes into understanding our county roadside managers, you can find out if your county has a roadside manager. So you can say, I haven't really noticed anything, but I'd like to. If you are in one of these counties that doesn't have a roadside manager, you can advocate for that. So if you are curious at all about that, you can find you can find this map itself on the Tallgrass Prairie Center's website. And it also shows where that particular county's roadside manager is housed and what department you can find them. But a newer, more nifty tool that I found, so Dr. Christine Nemec, who is the head of the roadside management program for the state, she also has created this awesome map that is interactive. You can also find it on the Tallgrass Prairie Center's website. You just hit the Find My Roadside Manager, and whenever you click on one of these little dots here, you can actually see who your county roadside manager is, what exactly their title is. So you can find out, it looks like for Delaware County, they've got the county engineer, who is also the roadside manager, but they also might be that weed commissioner, where they're housed, and then also how to get a hold of them, so phone or email if you ever have any questions. So getting into more of that nitty gritty, so this presentation is focused on different management methods depending on where you are. So landscaping on the more urban setting versus landscaping on more of the rural setting, or just management. All of these practices can be adapted to the more small scale management for, say, your lawn or a small property you have, as well as for our roadsides. It just might take a little bit of tweaking. So one of the most important tools that our roadside managers have, and that is available publicly, is the IRVM technical manual. This is available for free online, and you can still print it. It provides that basic technical support for new and existing roadside programs. So this guide was actually created by Dr. Christine Nemec alongside Josh Brandt, the Executive Director of the Cerro Gordo County Conservation Board, Kirk Henderson, a former roadside manager, and Jim Uth, the Deputy Director of Dallas County Conservation Board. So a real good wealth of knowledge. And they had several other roadside managers, graduate assistants, and even Tara Van Was, the State Director of the Living Roadway Trust Fund, help do the editing for this. So you know it's really good info, and it is, like I said, publicly available on the TPC's website. So the sections include steps to start the roadside vegetation management program, prescribed burning, seeding, all of these things listed down below. But I am going to focus on these because, you know, you might be dealing with some brush, erosion, weeds. You might be aiming to manage for pollinators, and prescribed burning is just something really important that we talk about. Like Sarah said, it's really difficult in a more urban setting, but you might notice in rural settings it's a little bit easier. And maybe that's something you're considering implementing, but there are definitely some steps and some guidance that you might need if you're wanting to move forward with that. So starting at the top, most important part, management starts at establishment. So all of the information pulled from here is from the technical guide, and it does go far more in depth, but like I said, if you have any questions, please let us know, and you can access that guide for free online. Right here, you can see our Story County roadside biologist and weed commissioner, Joe Cooker, applying the hydro seeds slurry to the roadside. So a lot of it starts at seeding. You might notice he's out there on the snow, and that's actually a good method to establish seed for prairie. So more often than not, you want to plant that seed either very, very, very early spring, as he's doing here. So there's still that snow on the ground, because, you know, Iowa is known for our second, third, sometimes fourth winters, or in the late fall, so that it gets that that cool defrost period, and that will trigger growth. So you want to make sure you use good seed, Iowa source seed. The TPC also has a seed distributor list, and those distributors also have plugs that you can buy. So if you're looking at landscaping in your yard, you can buy already grown plugs like you would for the greenhouse, and that can actually help with establishment. You want to, the guide recommends placing the seed in direct contact with the soil. Here we have the snow, which is totally fine. It just means that once that snow melts and the seed goes through, it'll have the moisture and the cool triggers, and it will directly have contact with that soil. You do not want to bury more than 1/4 inch deep. If you go too deep, it won't get the light signals to enough light to actually germinate as well. You want to pack the seed tightly to the soil. Part of that has to do with seed predation. We want to make sure that that's not taken up by, you know, we don't want all of it to be taken up. We can't prevent any of it from being taken, but someone's going to come by and see that it tastes good, but they'll leave some behind. You want to make sure you include those necessary erosion control measures. So using that hydro seed slurry, make sure that it sticks to the ground in the soil and doesn't just slide off and erode, and it will go directly down. And you want to mow those weeds during the first growing season. Timing is very important. We're going to hit on that several times, but you typically want to mow as the weeds are coming up. They grow much faster, and you want to cut them down before the prairie has the natives have a chance to grow up and will get cut as well. And then for the roadsides, conducting those prescribed burns every 3 to 5 years is really important, in making sure that we get rid of all of the excess thatch and make sure we put those nutrients back in the soil. And once we have that free, the prairie is much healthier. But like I said, in more of a rural or urban setting, it can be very difficult to do that, but there are other methods that you can adapt to use. Erosion control. So you might notice on your own property that you have a lot of erosion and you want to maintain that. So do we do on our roadsides too. So here you see some of our roadside workers applying erosion control blanket that is covering that hydro mulch. So it's a different growing season that they're working in, but they're doing that to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. So the guide recommends soil preparation. So you want to do if you need to, directional tracking or grooving. So the directional tracking is you're going perpendicular to the grade of the slope so that the soil sticks a little bit better. If you go parallel to the slope, then you're going to increase that erosion. And then grooving just nicks these really deep grooves in the soil so that it just sticks where it is and the seed can stick where it is as well. And then mulch and straw are great methods to also make sure that your seed doesn't go anywhere. It just sits right on top of it so the water rolls off. The other great thing about the guide is that they do include those insights from roadside managers and other professionals so that they actually do give you that feedback that you're looking for. So I included a quote here, but that's only one, and it does support these methods in being as effective as they are. Weed control. This is a struggle for anyone and everyone if you have anything growing outside. So at the very, very, very top of the list, establishing that native vegetation. So in our roadsides, we don't want those noxious and invasive weeds, not just because that they're harmful directly to us, but they can get into our fields. They can cause other issues. Establishing that native vegetation, their roots are so thick, so deep, and they grow so close together that they truly outcompete those invasive weeds as long as we establish them properly. And then not overusing those herbicides. We'll go a little bit more into that, but using those herbicides can damage our native populations. They're damaging to our own health, and we just want to not use them as much. Mowing is another great option. That's a great way to adapt to your own space. If you're trying to establish prairie plants in your yard or garden as well, if you do more of an actual plot where you just have a whole seed mix out there and you have like a mini pocket prairie, mowing is a great option. Mow the whole thing down. It can mimic burning very well as long as you kind of mulch it up. Even if you do, like if you typically do more of a cultivated landscaping type of thing, instead of mowing, just cutting it, you want to leave your stems and stalks over the winter because those are overwinter habitat for native insects. But in the spring, it's good to cut all of that out. Then biological control, that's more of introducing another species into the equation. It's similar to establishing native vegetation, but it can mean things like goats to mow things down or another insect to combat maybe a non-native insect, but that has its own issues. And you can read a little bit more about that in the manual as well. Timing is very important. Like I said, with the mowing, it really is important that you cut down those weeds before the native forbs and grasses are growing up so that they can compete properly and get established. Other things like when you do spray, making sure you're not spraying, you're doing spot spraying, but you're not spraying when other things are blooming, so you damage native populations. Making sure you have realistic goals. Every year we have a roadside conference and we have roadside managers and our researchers present things that they've learned. And they always talk about making sure that you hit those benchmarks and reasonable goals. And a lot of times they do end up having to backtrack because things just don't work out the way they want to for a particular project. So reassessing what you're doing and going back again and saying, okay, this didn't work. Let's try this other option and keep moving forward. And then landowner education. So this can count as landowner education, but it's also an important role for our roadside managers to educate our farmers, our private landowners, just on why these things are here and these other management methods that they can incorporate into their practices as well. So brush control is really important in our roadsides, but if you have a property, it's also very important for you. Again, that word timing at the very top. And this is where we get into the mechanical, chemical, and manual methods. So in our roadsides, it's especially important that we don't have those trees or brush because they do create those hazardous conditions for motorists. And like I said, with working with the DOT, safety is at the top. Pardon me. Something I noticed, especially when I was out in California, was that they had these very thick rail guards, and they actually did have trees in their right of ways. But out here in Iowa, if you notice, whenever you're driving, especially on the highways, we don't really have anything like those guards on the sides. It's just flat, either the grass or our native plantings, if your county happens to have that, but you usually don't see trees. And if you do, they're very far off from the right of way. So mechanical methods, like I said, these are very large methods. So they are meant for managing larger spaces. So we have the excavator, bucket truck, boom mower, very popular, tree shear, wood chipper, brush mower, brush cutter, and chainsaw. Chainsaw is something that you might use in your yard as well if it's large enough. But my favorite thing down here, which our roadside managers also still use, and I've helped them use in these types of events, are loppers. So those big cutters, those work perfectly well. And then chemical methods, there are a couple of ways that you can do spot treatment to limit your use of herbicide. So that can include cut stump treatment. So you just cut the tree and you stamp it with the herbicide, or you do a little spritz. Basil bark spray, you don't even cut the tree, you just spray the bottom of it. Typically these methods also include a dye with the herbicide so you can see where you've sprayed it, which is really important. So if you see a tree or a stump or anything, typically it's blue. If you see that on there, it means that it's been treated. Frill treatment, that is, you cut notches around the trunk. It's similar to girdling, but with herbicide. So then you spray the herbicide into those cuts that you make all the way around so that it carries it up through the xylem and phloem of the tree. And then foliar spray treatment, you're just spraying the foliage, which is more of a blanket spray, which we don't typically encourage, but sometimes our roadside managers deem it appropriate depending on the level of invasion by those species and what their overall goal for the site is. These can all be adapted to your own space as well. And then we get into the prescribed birding, the super exciting stuff. So for those of you who may not know why burning is so important, it's kind of a scary thing to think about, especially with our wildfires that are happening, especially in Canada and California. But burning is actually a really important part of our ecosystem. It discourages the growth of native or invasive and woody plants, because with our prairies, it's constantly at threat by that woody encroachment, which can outcompete our native grasses and plants. It invigorates the growth of those native plants because you're clearing every year. If you watch a prairie that hasn't been burned or cleared or mowed, it just keeps compiling the above ground stems and foliage. And then every spring when they try to sprout back up, the more you have in the way, the less they're able to push through, and then you are more susceptible to that encroachment. So it does invigorate that growth. It's kind of like cutting back something unhealthy and then you have better health, or like a hair. Like I think about that. You cut your hair back so you grow more hair that's healthier. And then, like I said, yep, it removes that thatch biomass from ditches and helps with that water infiltration because you don't have it blocking as much. And for our roadsides especially, we don't want those accidental burns to happen. And the longer you let that thatch build up, the more likely that something like a cigarette tossed out a window or even a lightning strike can start that, and then that creates hazardous conditions. So having those controlled burns really maintains the safety in our roadsides. And then one of the most important things that might be most applicable to those of you interested in putting natives in your yard, managing for pollinators. So sunny public lands, I'm just reading the caption here, serve as travel corridors between habitats that make Iowa roadsides viable habitat for pollinators. So you have the difference between having very, very large swaths of land and then kind of little rest stops. So right now I've been seeing a lot more monarchs traveling through, and it's good for us to have these little rest stops along the way for them to stop at and have the food and the nesting habitat so that they can lay their eggs and continue with the population. So managing for pollinators looks like maintaining herbicide application to a minimum, timing your mowing, and then of course planting the native vegetation that will attract them in the first place. Monarchs specifically go towards milkweed, but all of our other native pollinators and insects, they do thrive with these native species, while other things like dandelions and non-natives, they can offer some of the nutrients that they need to support. They don't typically offer everything. So using that targeted spraying, so not doing the blanket spraying as much as possible, spraying early in the growing season before flowering so you're not damaging their food source. Avoid spraying when weeds or nearby plants are flying, so that's very important. Native insects and other species, if it looks right, then they'll use it. So like I said, it's a big debate in terms of dandelions being beneficial or not, but they do offer some nutrients, so it's good to have them, But if those are in bloom and then you're spraying your natives, it will still impact them because they're eating from the non-natives that are in bloom. And then, of course, spray on days with little wind. We've all been downwind of when someone nearby has done a spray, and it's not very pleasant. It's even worse so for our pollinators. So timing of mowing in clear zones, and leaving perennial shrubs and standing woody stems for native bee habitat. Like I said, especially if you are looking to how to put your landscaping to bed in the winter, it looks very different when you're doing natives compared to non-natives, where you might prep your garden by covering the whole thing, cutting everything back, making sure that it looks, I put quotes up, neat. Whereas our native species, they kind of prefer just to hang out and be wild. So it's less work for you. Don't worry about moving the leaves. Don't worry about cutting back the stems, at least not until late spring, if at all possible, because you want those native pollinators to come in, because not only are you supporting them, but they are supporting you in having those species. So that's all I have for you all today. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this up and open us up to questions. Check out the questions box here. Do you recommend that we mow wildflowers in the fall? So that truly depends. Sarah, did you want to take this one away, or? Oop,
Sorry.
there we are.
And the question was,
Do you recommend that we mow wildflowers in the fall?
we actually here at Hartman did just recently mow our prairie overlook. So in the fall, part of the rotating management plan is to mow our, especially some of our younger prairies in the fall. So typically, I would say most of our burning gets done in the spring. We do have to be careful, and I've worked for other counties before, like I worked for Bremer County where we had to manage for the Massasauga rattlesnakes. Here we have to look a little bit more into ground birds that are nesting. So we burn in the spring, but we will mow in the fall.
Fantastic. I see. What would you recommend for a backyard with some shade?
I've had tremendous luck growing cardinal flower, which is a native prairie plant, but it is more tolerant of shade, and it has the most vibrant red blossoms on it and super easy to manage, very drought resistant, like a typical native prairie plant would be, but they are more shade desirable. So that is one form specifically that we plant here at Hartman that does extremely well. Some of the lobelia will too, but if you're looking for really something vibrant that blooms still within the shade, that is one in particular. It's a little trickier with the prairie plants because they do tend to like full sun, but that is one in particular that does well. Some of our not as vibrant burning, like blooming flowers, more shrubs. We have some better luck with, like the silky dogwood and the red twig dogwood don't do terribly here in some of our shaded areas. But as far as the forbs go, the cardinal flower seems to do really well here at Hartman.
I can confirm the red inflorescence looks almost just, it looks fake when you see a whole bunch of it going. It's gorgeous, and it attracts a lot of hummingbirds too. They have a very good sap for them, not sap, nectar. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Sarah Beckman. It's Sarah Day. I work at Hardin County SWCD and have family coming in wanting to replace turf with natives. Do you have any recommendations for this?
Sure. I mean, it depends on the goal at the end. And again, there's only one way to eat an elephant. It's one bite at a time. So pick a manageable amount to begin. Sometimes we encourage folks to do section by section so that you can really manage your prairie. Hardin County has an outstanding IRVM program, and when I worked for that county, we would be able to get seed mixes from then the manager there. So I would maybe contact Hardin County Conservation to see if they do have still a good relationship with their roadside veg manager, and you could direct seed that. You could do that still in the fall, and then the snow will sit on top of it, and that really encourages some of those seeds to really pop open. If you want to do it without a chemical, I did work at a no-till flower farm for a while in between some things. We would tarp sections of turf off and let it really, really kill off. And then we would remove sort of any remaining Kentucky bluegrass that was still there, just kind of like shaving off the surface without tilling it too aggressively. And then we broadcast seeded the prairie plants in. And then in the spring, you know, you can manage it for those first 3 years, maybe by mowing or burning it, but to be very, very patient when growing prairie, because they are going to grow, roots are going to grow down before the plants are going to grow up. That's one of the outstanding things about planting prairie is once it's established, the management is very slim to none because there's no watering. And once those forbs really come in, the weed control kind of takes care of itself. There will be some, but patience is a virtue in prairie. And also, hi, Sarah Day.
Yeah, those are great methods, and it's something that I also recommend. Definitely smothering helps get that establishment going, and especially if you're not trying to use those chemical methods. Another thing you can do to help, you do need to be very, very patient. So you might put a seed mix out there, and like Sarah said, they grow down before they grow up. So what you see from year to year might be very different. First year, you might see more of the common species, and the longer you let your prairie go and maintain it, the more diversity you might see. And you can even directly plant plugs in certain areas that you see that might be patchy or where you want to see more diversity of specific species, just to give them a bit of a head start.
I would add too that amending your soil so that it's not dirt only, and there is definitely a difference. Treating your soil as though it's a living thing, sometimes preparing that before you seed will set yourself up with more success. And when we work with Blooming Prairie, they do have like a compost blend that we mix in with our soil when we're going to plant something in our pollinator parkway. So just making sure that the foundation is set by creating some good biodiversity within your soil before you begin.
Awesome. And I'm in year 4 of about 1,100 square foot of pollinator habitat that is not as colorful as I had hoped. The last 2 years, I have mowed it down in the fall and winter, seeded with various wildflower mixes. It's a little difficult sometimes. It has brought a bit more color, but still not what I had hoped for. Any advice on increasing the color in the pollinator habitat?
I'm interested in, I'm assuming it's in full sun. And I also would say if it was native seed, some of those forbs, like you said, Bree, the patience piece could come later, 5 years plus for some of those, like I would say, like bottled or fringed gentian coming in, or some of our liatris is a little bit slower to come on, as well as, you know, the Culver's root and some of the flowers that are a little bit slower to come on also will kind of add to that array of color. But, you know, it is because of the blooming season, we'll have our periods of yellows and purples and then transition into like our bergamots and coneflowers like on the screen. And then we get a little bit more golden with the goldenrods in the August and September months. So If it was a native seeds only, I would say, like, give it a full 5 years before um, to see all of its glory, if you will, because some of those more diverse colors that come in maybe come in a little later, like the bottle gentian and some of the lobelia and the cardinal flower. Those might be coming a little bit later. Bergamot and coneflower are pretty, and goldenrod are certainly quick to take off, at least maybe faster than some of the other forbs.
For sure.
Possibly could be also, again, the amending of some soil. If you want to throw some of that, throw some compost in there if it's a matter of needing more carbon or nitrogen, like you would in a compost bin. Like some food for your flowers might encourage more blooms.
Exactly, completely agree. And if you're still worried after year 5, 6, 7, doing exactly what you're doing, overseeding, maybe trying different timing with the overseeding and directly putting in plugs for those species that you're wanting to see. I hate personifying plants, but they do go where they want to go. Sometimes you'll plant a specific species in a spot, or you'll plant it all over and you'll be like, where did it all go? Or one year you'll see it pop up in one spot. The next year it pops up in a different one. It might be something that you haven't noticed that has maybe migrated a little bit around the space, but definitely have that patience. Okay. Oh, this is a good question. Do you try to control wild parsnip, and how?
We do try to control wild parsnip in our heavily recreated areas. For example, that little island that is kind of a recent project here at Hartman. We have removed that. In this situation, we burned it, not burned it, I'm sorry. It was a mowed, and then Jim Weimer, our forester, will bag it and remove it. Usually if we can try to get, good and protected, cut it, pull it, bag it, and then completely remove it off site. If it's beyond a recreated area, we don't manage it too much, at least here at Hartman. We also don't have a mower that's hitting it and dispersing more seed in any way. So I guess in our site in particular, we've just recently started managing it where we have more foot traffic or people, kiddos reaching in and touching it, and then we removed it off of site that way.
When I worked at the Tallgrass Prairie Center and we would weed the plots, that was a big issue that we had, was definitely that. And we did do some mowing out there. And so having issues of chopping it up and spreading it around was definitely prevalent. Our most successful method, especially if you're limited on space, we would sometimes bring a tarp out and make sure you're wearing, long sleeve clothes, pants, closed-toed shoes, good thick gloves, and manually removing it, placing it on the tarp to dry out, and then pulling it, especially before it goes to seed, to make sure we don't spread it. That way it limits any kind of contact and then limits any spread that it might have. We have a question. Is it possible to order handouts for programs? I'm a master gardener working with Johnson County staff with its Pocket Prairie program.
Would that be for me or you, Bree?
That would be for us. Trees Forever. Yes, we do have handouts. We have prairie seedling ID booklets that we have in our Marion office that we could absolutely get you. We also have some wetland seedling ID booklets. Those would be most applicable to kind of a prairie setting. But in addition to those two, we also have a pollinator species ID booklet that includes all sorts of great references to bees and other pollinators. And then we have our tree and shrub booklet, ID booklet, that provides a whole listing of trees and shrubs in Iowa. All of those are available at our Trees Forever main offices, or you can get in contact with any of our field coordinators, Bree or myself, and we can help you get those for any sort of event or classroom you might have, anything like that.
Perfect. I know we're coming up on time, but we do have a few more questions. So if you have to hop off, no worries at all. Just if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And then I think we'll take just a few more here. What native plants would you recommend? Come on now. Would you recommend for trying to replace their lawn, but there is heavy foot traffic, including dogs? I've heard yarrow can be a good fit.
I would second that. In some of our heavily trafficked areas, including my own personal yard, I have chickens and dogs and kids. And yarrow, if you let it grow and go into flower, it's lovely to look at. It also can come up just like grass, essentially, the way that it spreads. Yarrow would be good for a heavily trafficked area. I'm guessing if it's a heavily trafficked area, you don't want too high of forms, but I would say, you know, the grasses are typically resilient by way of foot traffic. And really, if you think of the history of prairie and what used to walk on them by way of 2,000-pound bison, I think that these forms are as resilient as the Kentucky bluegrass once they're established.
Perfect. Will wildflowers grow where tree stumps have been ground out?
I think that I'm trying to think about how we've amended our sort of our front of our property here. And I know that there are some tree species, in particular walnut, things are a little bit harder to get to grow after we've ground out a stump. But again, if you amend the soil and, you know, make sure that the balance of the carbon and the nitrogen is such, there's different types of compost that you can amend on your own. And just making sure that takes place before just direct seeding or planting into where a ground out stump would be. I think you'd have success if the soil is amended in that location.
Awesome. And I think this will be our last one here. Can you give more information about where you get, or about Blooming Prairie, where you get your compost?
Yes. And maybe Bree, you could help me out on that when sharing do you mind sharing their website?
Of course. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here, and I will pull that and put it in the chat.
Thank you so much.
Of course. All right, and then if there were questions that we did not get to, I deeply apologize. Please feel free to reach out to us and we will get those answered for you. I will see if it's possible for me to save these questions and reach out individually as well. This webinar will be available. I'm not sure what the timeline would be, but we will have the recording posted so you can refer back to it. I did put my slides in the handouts if you would like to refer to those, but otherwise, thank you all for being here, and thank you so much to Sarah for joining us today and sharing your knowledge. It has been absolutely fantastic. Just pulling up that Blooming Prairie Nursery link here so that everybody has a chance to grab it if they would like to. Throw that down here. Jeff, any closing words for us?
No, but if you could share your screen for
of course. So here we are.
There it is.
But yes, they sell this soil amendment, and I was there at their plant sale last year, and it was gorgeous. I mean, just feeling it, you can tell that it's a really good soil.
Yes.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Oh man, okay.